Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for the show. And this is where we dig deeply into different topics in our culture. And why do we do this? We do this so that we can educate ourselves in order to have those deep conversations with those around us. Conversations that count. Conversations with an eternal perspective. Today, I have a fascinating guest. He's like a gift that God has just put in front of me lately. His name is Pastor Mark Beltz. He's the founder and senior pastor of El Shaddai Ministries in Washington State. He is a well-known and popular speaker on the feasts of the Lord and has authored 4 best-selling books and videos on the feasts that have gone global. Mark Beltz has lectured at congregations and conferences all over the world, including 12 countries on 5 continents. He's been on the cover of several magazines and has been interviewed many times on national radio stations, as well as appearing on several different television programs. And now we get to talk to him on the Faith and Culture Show. Pastor Biltz has a local congregation in Washington State and live streams their weekly service on their website, which we'll get from him before he goes today. And he is seen on 200 cities from 20 nations. So let's get him on the show and welcome him to the Faith and Culture Show. We're talking about Pastor Blitz's his what he does, his congregation. He is nationwide. He's international. He has people watching him from all over the world. And he was explaining to me before we came on, I don't know, we had a glitch here, technical glitch, that El Shaddai is the tender side of God, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And he, of course, because he focuses on Hebrew, he recognized my logo, which is Emeth, which is truth. And that's why I'm living into the truth. And that's what it stands for, in case anyone was ever wondering. So, Pastor, is it Pastor Blitz or Pastor Mark, or do you just go by anything?
Oh, I go by anything, but it's Pastor Mark Beltz.
Beltz. Okay, I was transposing.
That happens all the time.
Does it really? No,
Yeah.
You're just being nice. Okay. Anyhow, well, I wanted to talk to you because you're a prolific author. And you've written more than just 4 books. You've written several, and you have a few coming out. But what caught my eye is the fact that you talk a lot about, and you've written a lot about the feasts of the Lord. And
Yes.
I don't think there are Christians who really focus on the feasts, but very few. And most of us just look at the Seder around Passover time, but we don't really look at the others. Can we talk a little bit about the feasts and their importance? Is that okay?
I would absolutely love to,
Okay.
because for me, it is the foundation for Christianity. And so much of Christianity, the foundation's been destroyed. It really has. Mm-hmm. To give you an idea of how important it is, the word feast is a wrong translation to begin with. In Genesis 1:14, it talks about God creating the sun and the moon. And he says the number one reason was for signs. And then it says seasons. Well, when we think of seasons, we think of winter, spring, summer, fall.
That's right.
When we think of feast, we think of food. But do you know it's the same Hebrew word, moed? How can moed be winter and also be food? Both English translations are wrong. Okay. And then when it says days and years in Genesis 1:14, it was talking about the Shemitah year, the Jubilee year, okay, the holy days. So what God is saying in Genesis 1:14, he created the sun and the moon. Number one was for signs, which is an eclipse. You can only have a solar eclipse on a new moon, which is why God wanted Israel to follow the new moon. You can only have a total lunar eclipse on a full moon, which is why God had Passover and Sukkot on full moons. So when there were eclipses on those specific days, God is trying to tell them something. Now, this is huge because not only were what he's saying, and think about this, he created his calendar on the fourth day of creation. He created the sun and the moon. He did not create mankind until the sixth day. He thought his calendar was so important, he literally created it 2 days before we were even created because he wanted us to be on the same page as him. But today, the church is on a pagan solar calendar. Islam is on a lunar calendar. They are both very scientific, very mathematical, but it's not the one God uses. This is why some years Easter will fall a month before Passover. How do you celebrate the resurrection a month before he dies unless you're on a different calendar? And so just like you don't want to be late for Noah's Ark, you don't want to be late for what's coming. And what I tell people is God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if he fulfilled the spring Moedim, the feast, dying on Passover, buried on unleavened bread, rising on first fruits, Shavuot or Pentecost happening on Shavuot, he'll fulfill the fall feast to the very day of his second coming. And so we have to know prophetically what is coming. So I teach what is coming. And they will happen on those very days. I got a little bit of a cold. But does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I've heard this. I've heard that we are on a completely different calendar. And the Jewish people are they still on a calendar, or is it just the like the Jews that are the Hasidic Jews who
no,
really
all the Jewish people,
God.
All of the Jewish people are on the biblical calendar.
Okay.
They really are. But what Christians need to understand, English is so bad for your Bible, but in Leviticus 23, it talked about that these divine appointments were to be convocations, holy convocations. But the Hebrew word is mikra, and that literally means a dress rehearsal. So just like if you're getting married and you have a dress rehearsal beforehand and you go through all the motions and everything so it goes smoothly, every one of these feasts were dress rehearsals of what was going to happen on the very day at the very hour. So every year they would kill unknowingly the Passover lamb on Passover at 3 p.m. because that's when it was going to happen. It wasn't going to happen on any other day. Think of it this way. If your child dies before you do, oh my, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But God the Father said, look, I'm going to determine what day my son is going to die. I'm going to determine what time he's going to die. And he even said, I'm going to determine what songs are going to be sung during his funeral. He had King David write the funeral hymn 1,000 years before Yeshua was even born.
I never thought about it that way.
Oh, well, you remember in the Gospels, right before he was betrayed and rejected, it says they sang a hymn and went over to the Mount of Olives, right? I know the words to the song. And you have a copy of the words of the song they sang. Because for 1,500 years, every Passover, the Psalms was their hymn book. And they would always sing the Hallel, which is Psalm 113 through Psalm 118. So the final hymn that he sang before he was betrayed and rejected was Psalm 118. And here are the words they were singing. This is the stone the builders have rejected. It's become the headstone of the corner. Wow, that's what they were singing right before Judas had betrayed him and turned him over. I can't hear you.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry.
There you're back.
We just don't hear about things like that. We just take it for granted that it's in the New Testament, and that's it. We don't look back. Now, I'm not saying everybody's like that. I'm saying many Christians, and we're not taught that in the average church, no matter what congregation you're in or what denomination.
This is why I teach this, and I have such a large congregation around the world, because I teach things people have never heard before. For example, they sing the Hallel 3 times a day during the Passover holiday. They sing it at 9 in the morning, the time of the morning sacrifice. They sing it at noon, and they sing it at 3 in the evening at the time of the evening sacrifice. Josephus records there were 2 million Jews in Jerusalem for Passover that year that Yeshua died. So you have a 2 million member choir all around the city. And it says in the Gospel of Mark that they bound him to the cross the 3rd hour of the day. That's 9 in the morning. So at the very moment they are binding Yeshua to the cross at 9 in the morning, the high priest is also binding the Passover lamb to the horns of the altar. And they're all singing Psalms 118. And the last verses are, bind the sacrifice with cords, even to the horns of the altar. This is what Yeshua is hearing everyone sing while he's being bound. And then at noon, when the lights go out, and here Yeshua is lifted up between heaven and earth, being suspended there, they're singing Psalm 118 again. And what does he hear everyone singing? The right hand of the Lord is lifted up. The right hand of the Lord is being exalted. That's in Psalm 118. And then at 3, at the very time of the evening sacrifice, when they kill the Passover lamb, that's when he passes away, saying it is finished. And he's hearing everyone say that the Lord's mercy endures forever. But it's amazing when you see all of this was pre-planned 4,000 years before he came.
Wow. God, this is where to me, God is so perfect. His timing is perfect. And it's not like the pagan society that actually took him, the Roman society, and everything was timed. They thought according to their time, but in actuality, God had everything happening on his time, on his clock. So this brings it more important to me that we need to understand God's timing. What is going to happen for those who are Christian, who believe in all, obviously have given their lives over. They are in ministry, and we don't have an understanding of the biblical calendar, God's calendar.
It is so huge. This is why I wrote my book called God's Daytimer. And I show how God has a divine appointments are scheduled. And I really recommend people get that book because God has been sending signs in the heavens that are phenomenal that people need to be aware of with just how close we are to these last days. And I always encourage Christians to get on God's calendar and how important that is.
So how do we do that? Do we go and we buy a book like yours?
Well, yeah, you can go and buy the book. I have people all over the world. I keep all of the festivals. We'll do a Passover Seder, and I'll have 1,500 people at the Passover Seder, people from churches all over. On Rosh Hashanah, we do the Feast of Trumpets. We'll have over 1,000 people at our local building, and we'll have people all over the world joining us. We do all of the festivals. And so people can, I've even had a lot of churches doing them now. There's entire churches in San Diego and all over. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. But yes, I have, I'm going to Nepal here in a few weeks and India and then over to Kenya. But we're getting people all excited about being on God's calendar. And the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. But once you know, oh my goodness, it's the most exciting things in human history because now you're literally walking in sync with the Creator.
Wow. That is so, I love that. I love that idea. Now I think on your website, you have things to download.
We have so much to download. Yes. All of our teachings are free. The notes are free. I have like 8 pages of Bible verses every single week because people want to hear what God has to say, not what I have to say. So I more or less connect the dots and show people linking everything together so they can see it. But there is nothing that more important for the Christian walk than to walk with God on his time schedule. You don't tell your boss when you're going to work. He tells you when you're going to work. And so we want to align with God. And oh my goodness, your whole life falls into place.
Well, this is all new to me. So I'm learning along with everybody else who has not heard of things like this. And another thing I noticed on your website is you have writings about prophetic insights. What would you say to the Christians who have been going to these seeker sensitive churches and maybe they're starting to grow out of that and they want more, but they have been hearing that these gifts have stopped. They stopped in the New Testament. How do you approach people like that?
Well, there's a couple of different scenarios here. I definitely believe that the gifts are still for today because it's for the equipping of the saints and we sure need to be equipped.
Yes,
so, but at the same time, now I'll tell you a little bit about my personal background. I am Jewish on my father's side. I have relatives who died in the Holocaust. They're listed in Yad Vashem in Israel. But what happened, my ancestor, my great-great-grandfather, who was in France, Jewish, married to a nice Jewish lady, decided he didn't want to be poor anymore. So he ran off to America with a wealthy Catholic lady and had, my grandpa. And then he ended up going back to France. His wife wanted nothing to do with him anymore. And so my great-grandma, who was Catholic, wanted to let everyone know that, their father was Jewish. And so she raised them Catholic, of course, but they would still do the Passover Seder. And then my dad was raised Catholic and he married my mom, who was a Protestant. But I still to this day have the Hebrew English Haggadah we would do to remember our Jewish roots. And then when I became 19, I left the Catholic Church. I got saved. And I traveled around the United States. This is way back in the 70s. I'll be 70 years old next year. But back in the 70s, I was with an organization. You may have heard of Dave Wilkerson. Dave Wilkerson, he was my next door neighbor. I played ping pong with him. Leonard Ravenhill. Leonard Ravenhill was one of my teachers. So I was saved from the Catholicism into the charismatic movement of the 70s. And so I was involved with that. But I saw some good stuff and some bad stuff, some crazy stuff as well as good stuff. I still believe in all of the gifts, but I know a lot of it is being abused. And so then after that, for the last 35 years, I've jumped into the Hebraic mindset to help Christians understand the authenticity of the Bible. I'll give you one quick example. Now, this does not make any theological difference at all, but it's what is authentic. Do you remember when Peter denied the Messiah and the rooster was crowing 3 times?
Yes.
It never happened. Okay. Yes, it happened, but not like we think in our Western mindset. There were never chickens allowed in Jerusalem because chickens weren't acceptable as a sacrifice. And not only that, who wants to smell a stinking chicken slaughterhouse outside of the temple? That's an outdoor temple. What that was, there was the temple crier who was called the rooster, who every morning cried out 3 Hebrew phrases that everyone come and begin the morning service. So yes, it happened, but he wasn't talking about a cockle-doodle-doo rooster. He was talking about a priest who had the title of rooster who would call out. So that is what is authentic, but that shouldn't affect your theology at all.
Right. Thank you for saying that, because a lot of people, okay, fine, I can't believe anything I read. No, that's not it at all. It's just misunderstanding in the translation of things. So that must have been very early in the morning, probably
Yes.
dawn.
Yep, exactly, because they had to follow the Torah. And at sunrise is when they had to start. And so they had a temple priest who would be watching, and someone would call out to him and asked if he could see Hebron. Okay. And he would say, yes, I can see it as far as Hebron. Okay. So that was the first crow out. All right. But so anyway, it was just 3 calls that they would do. And then he would tell everyone to come and get in your position and places, and we're going to start the morning service. So that's what he was talking about.
That is fascinating. This is exciting to learn all of this. Okay, you have a book that you showed us a while ago. Can you put that up again? Because I think people would like to purchase that.
We also have a DVD, but it is mind-blowing. I mean, absolutely mind-blowing. And it'll help everyone see that the New Testament will come alive, full color, 3D. I'll give you another example. In John chapter 7, this is when Yeshua, his brothers who don't really believe in him, he said, hey, it's the Feast of Tabernacles. Why don't you go and reveal yourself? Okay. And so he doesn't go up. He comes up in the middle of the feast and he starts sharing. And if you remember, this is when he cries out. It says he stood and he cries out. As the scripture says, whoever comes after me, out of his belly will flow rivers of living water. Well, I can tell you everything that was going on when that happened. Okay. They would sing Psalm 118 every Feast of Tabernacles. Plus, they would sing Exodus 15 and Isaiah 12, because those 3 places all have the phrase, the Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. Well, guess what? There were like 2 million Jews in Jerusalem. And so they divided the 24 courses of priests into 3 divisions. And 8 of those courses, all they would do would slaughter the millions of sacrifices that were coming. And then the other 2 groups, every morning, if you can imagine, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims at the south end of the temple, and they're going down through the city of David to the pool of Siloam, because that's where living water was. I mean, no, Yeshua's living water. The high priest would have a golden pitcher that he would dip into the pool of Siloam to have the living water. His assistant had a silver pitcher that was filled with wine. And every morning they'd go down and then they'd march in unison, thousands of priests always going back up through the water gate. And when they would get into where they sacrificed the animals, they would do a Jericho march around the altar one time and pour the water and the blood simultaneously on top of the altar. But on the last day, they would do 7 times. They would march around the altar, and then they would do it. And in John 7, it was at this very moment when Yeshua interrupted what they were singing. And Isaiah 12 is a hymn that they were singing. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. Therefore, with joy, will you draw water from the wells of Yeshua? That's what salvation means. Mm-hmm. And right when they said, with joy, you'll draw water from the wells of Yeshua, that's when he jumped up, interrupted the whole song service, and said, yes, as the scripture is saying, whoever comes to me, out of his belly will flow rivers of living water. Well, guess what? They have to finish the song. And the next verse of the song is, shout, O inhabitant of Zion, because the Lord your God is standing in your midst.
So they had to proclaim it.
They had to proclaim it. And then the other group would go down to the Motzah Valley at the eastern gate, and they would cut down willow branches that were 20 feet long. And there'd be thousands of priests with their willow branches, and they'd wave them and take a step, wave them and take a step. And the whole time they're marching up in unison with the high priest who's bringing the living water and the blood, the southern gate. Here, if you can imagine, thousands of willow branches rustling in the wind. You can hear the rustling of the wind. Mm-hmm. The Hebrew word for wind is ruach, which is the spirit. So here you have the living water and the blood coming up to the southern gate. The wind of the spirit is coming up to the eastern gate. And when they got to their respective gates, neither of them could enter the temple until there was another priest who was at the corner, would play a flute. Because a flute is pierced, this priest was known as the pierced one, who would call the wind and the water to enter the temple.
Wow. Do they still practice this today?
Well, there's no temple. There's no temple.
Okay. So they don't do a mock of it.
No,
okay.
They try to do what they can do.
Right. Okay. And this is the Feast of Tabernacles.
Yes. And I go through my whole book. I go through what was going on during these festivals so that the Gospels come alive and everything changes. It's turned on its head.
Wow. That's fascinating. Yes, I think everyone, you need to go out and get that book. We'll have all of your information in the show notes so that if somebody's driving and can't see the screen or write anything down, we'll have that there.
Yeah. It's just God's Daytimer.
God's Daytimer. Okay. I really, there's so much I could keep asking you questions about this, but I also noticed that, these are things that it's good to understand the culture, the context in which everything happened and was written, because the authors of the New Testament, they understood.
Exactly.
They were living.
Exactly.
Then. And so I think that's what even made Paul even more fervent about who is this guy. He's misdirecting people, and I think Paul is very misunderstood and seen like this bad guy. He was zealous for God.
Yes.
And that's why when he's goes to his knees on the road to Damascus, why are you persecuting me? Don't kick against the goads. But it's because he really did not want people just kind of distorting the word of God.
Yes.
It would be great if we had that kind of passion today about those who distort the word of God.
Yeah, I call it just like GMO, genetically modified food. A lot of people are putting GMO in the Bible. They're trying to modify it, and they take away so much. Let me give you one perfect example. Here's just another example. When you hear in the Gospels about the Samaritan woman at the well who had 5 husbands, and the one she was with wasn't even her husband. How was that taught? What kind of a woman is she?
Oh, how is it taught today?
Yeah. How do people consider what type of a woman she is, or what?
I hear the sermons. I hear it gets glossed over as she was just sleeping with one man after another, or living.
None of that is true. None of that is true. As a matter of fact, she was one of the holiest women in the entire New Testament. She was honored so huge. Because this is why people don't know the culture. Let me give you an example. Do women have any rights in the Middle East?
Oh, no, they don't. And
especially 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, it was very bad.
Okay, they couldn't even get a job. They couldn't work. If they didn't have a mother, brother, son, uncle, someone to take care of them, they were on the streets. Now, could a woman get a divorce, or was she stuck? She's stuck. Even in Saudi Arabia today, they don't let the women, they monitor everywhere their wife goes. They can't leave the country. So a woman can't even get a divorce. It's one thing to be single and fooling around, another thing to be married and fooling around. So she would have been stoned by now. Therefore, it couldn't be that. She'd have been killed, especially 2,000 years ago. But what do we do find? This woman loves God. She's expecting the Messiah to come at any time. She worships God on the wrong mountain, but what church doesn't have their doctrine screwed up somewhere? Okay. But for the most part, here's a non-Jewish woman who loves God, worships God, and everyone respects her. Everyone from Samaritans all believed everything she said. So this lady has credibility. So what's going on here? Okay. The first thing that Yeshua says to her was, can I have a drink of water from your cup? And she goes, you Jews reject us. She's in shock. Number one, he's an Orthodox Jew. He would consider her unclean. And not only that, he's willing to drink out of her unclean cup. So this is breaking down major barriers, because Yeshua is a man who was totally rejected. So he's meeting this lady's needs who feels totally rejected. The fact that she had 5 husbands means she has been dumped 5 times. This woman had 5 husbands because none of them want to keep her. So she's rejected by 5 guys. The fact that she's living with this one guy, all he's saying is, hey, at least this guy's kind enough to take you in to protect you, but he doesn't even want to marry you. So what Yeshua is saying, none of these guys want to stay married to you. All right. And so what's going on here? Why isn't she there at 9 a.m. getting water in the cool of the day with the other ladies? Because they reject her. Okay. So what's the case? She can't get pregnant. She's barren. And this is why no man wants to stay married to her, because it's all about the land and an heir. So here she's rejected by Jews. She's rejected by men. All the women reject her, like Hagar harassed Sarah, and like Hannah was harassed. She doesn't want to hear all the women gossiping, God must not love you because you can't get pregnant. And so here she is. She doesn't feel loved by the Jews, by men, by women. She feels rejected by God because she can't get pregnant. And it's to a woman who is not even a Jew who gets to have the forever honor of being recorded. She was the first person to take the gospel to the nations. And when you see the Samaritans were all coming, and he says his disciples, look, the fields are white unto harvest. Samaritans all wear white. He was pointing at the Samaritans that are about to be harvested into the kingdom. So now we find she isn't some loose woman. She's a woman, a non-Jew, a woman who was the first one to take the gospel to the nations, forever recorded. And she is totally honored and blessed.
Wow. Wow, that changes so
Everything.
much. And God is so good. And just like you said with the El Shaddai, you know, he's comforting, and he doesn't miss a thing.
Right.
And so what I'm going to move into your other book, I guess it's more recent. You know, he warns us in scripture that those who guide children down the wrong path.
Yes.
And, you know, I think of that immediately, how I know if we do not stand up and pay attention to all of the human trafficking going on and be brave about it, that we are under judgment. And it's our own fault. And your book, and I have a picture of it here.
Yeah.
America at War.
Yep.
And what I really love is the way you point out the sons of light versus the sons of darkness. And I cannot tell you how many churches are too afraid, or they don't see this. But we've just been through awful, like in our face evil for 4 years. Between 2021 and 2020, you know, up until the 20th of January 2025, and who knows what's next. But it has been horrible, and for anyone who didn't see that, I'm not sure if they are awake.
Right.
So, I mean, like truly spiritually aware of what's going on, because this is a spiritual battle for our minds, for our soul. So, do you want to get into a little bit about that book? I know that.
Sure. I can. No, that's okay. But the amazing thing, and I'm the only one that I know of in this whole planet who wrote this book over a year ago. Wow. And on page 124, I said Iran would attack Israel in April of 2025. And that's what happened. Iran, or 2024. So Iran, literally, I told everybody that was going to happen in April, that Iran would attack Israel, and it happened. I also wrote in the book that we would see terrorist attacks on the homeland, and we have in New Orleans and Las Vegas. And what I do is I go through and I show the signs in the heavens that God said he would use as signs on his calendar, was telling us war is going to be coming big time right here in the United States. As you may know, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, but there is a total lunar eclipse coming over the United States next Friday night, and it's Purim. Purim is the whole story of Amalek wanting to kill all the Jews. It's an evil spirit of murder. Now, your listeners may not know, but Amalek in Hebrew means a nation who chops off heads. And that is exactly what Hamas did when they attacked on October the 7th.
Yeah.
And Hamas in Hebrew means violence. And God was going to destroy the earth because of violence. Well, when I see what is coming and how everything falls on the biblical calendar, now some of your audience may not be familiar with the Shemitah cycle or the Jubilee cycle, but those are very, very, very important. And let me tell you why. Are you familiar with the prophet Daniel and the 70 weeks of prophecy?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this is going to come as a shock. I always jokingly tell everybody. Did you know Daniel was Jewish? Okay. Of course he was Jewish. Okay. Those 70 weeks were all 70 Shemitah cycles.
Wow.
That's what they were. His 70 weeks were 70 Shemitah cycles. The whole reason he went into captivity and all the Jews did, it says, is because they had not been honoring the Shemitah cycle. Every 7th year, the land had to rest. And it was an economic reset. But it's because Israel refused to do that, that God said, you're all going into Babylon for 70 years, and I'm going to let the land rest 70 years because you didn't let it rest for 490 years. Okay? So you have to understand the 70 weeks of Daniel are Shemitah weeks. And if there's 1 week left called the tribulation can only begin at the beginning of a Shemitah cycle.
So we just had one, didn't we?
Well, a couple of years ago. The next one is the fall of 2029.
Wow.
And so what I'm saying is the tribulation cannot start until the fall of 2029. And if it doesn't start then, it can't start until 2036. So I'm not setting dates when the tribulation is going to start, but I know the times and seasons that Christians are aware of. A lot of them will say we're supposed to know the times and seasons. I'll ask them, what time is it? Oh, I don't know. What season is it? I don't know. Okay, so in my books, I explain what the times and seasons are, and I even have in the back of this book every Jubilee year, clear back to creation, every Shemitah year, clear back to creation. And it is all based on math and science. There's a lot of people out there trying to impose their own calendar on people, either the Zadok or the Essene or whatever. Forget that. God is only going to be using the biblical calendar he's used with the Jewish people. And I have all the math, all the facts, the science laid out clear back to creation. And so we know that there is a possibility the fall of 2029 is when the tribulation has the next opportunity begin, but we need to be watching so we know what's coming.
Wow. Wow. Yes, we do. I don't know how many of us out there are discussing these things. We're watching the signs. We recognize, many of the people I know recognize that this has been a spiritual battle, especially the last, I don't know, since 2020, because it's too evil.
Yes.
And the things that have been put in place are wicked beyond belief.
Yes.
Wanting to put things inside of people's body to change their genetics is one of them. Just having institutions that are supposed to educate our young people, they have been perverting them.
Yes.
And it's gotten down to the lowest grades, and they want to do even younger. They want to grab those children at 3. There's so much perversion, and even in our country, we've got these politicians who are running, governors, putting language into their legislation that erases what a woman is.
Right.
He just completely and does not respect the womb. So it's just wickedness, wicked, vile, and the human trafficking that's being unveiled. And for me, it's not fast enough.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to my family this past week and just saying, these children live in hell every day.
Yeah.
Things are happening to them that we kind of, oh God, we can't talk about that. Really? Well, they're living it, and God is watching it. He knows. Yes. And he's waiting for us to stand up and do something.
Exactly right. As a matter of fact, in this book, I have a section about the sex trafficking that's going on and where it's taking place.
Oh, it's horrific. Okay, Pastor Mark, is there anything else that you want to tell us about the spiritual war that's happening before I ask you about your newest book?
It's all good. I just want people to get on God's calendar. It is so important. For example, I'll just give one more very important example. This is how you know when things happen in the world, if they were coincidence or God had his handprint on them. Okay, Leviticus 25, you can only proclaim the year of Jubilee on Yom Kippur. Okay, well, guess what? The 1973 Yom Kippur War was the first day of a Jubilee cycle. So here, wow, a Jubilee cycle, and the very opening day is a war. 73 and 50 years is 2023. And guess what? October 7th was the very last day of the Jubilee cycle, and war broke out. So here, this last Jubilee cycle on God's calendar was bookended with the Yom Kippur War and the Iron Swords War. That is huge, with God trying to communicate with us. And there are things that are coming over the next several years that I talk about in my book, America at War, that we need to be prepared for.
Okay, when you've mentioned some dates, even from, the next cycle would be on 2029. But it sounds to me like this is more about the Gregorian calendar and not the Hebrew calendar.
Oh, no, it's totally the biblical calendar. But the thing is, people need the Gregorian to know how to line it up. The Gregorian calendar is off. And so I only promote the biblical calendar. But for people to know where they're at, as a matter of fact, I don't have that, but we have a calendar we produce every year that intercorrelates the Gregorian calendar with the biblical calendar, so you know exactly what day it is. As a matter of fact, my Apple Watch or my iPhone, I can put the Hebrew calendar in it. Just go to settings, go to calendar. You can add a calendar. And so I always know exactly where we're at on the biblical calendar.
Wow. Okay. So, but aren't there just 360 days in the Jewish calendar, and there are 365 with us?
No.
How does that work?
No, it's a little bit different than that. And so the biblical holidays always fall different every year on our calendar. It's always the same year in the biblical calendar, but because on our calendar we add one day every 4 years. On the biblical calendar, they add an entire month 7 times over 19 years.
Oh, wow.
And so it's always changing.
Wow. Okay. I can look into that and try. I guess you just have to know get some help from someone like yourself.
That's why we produce the calendar for people, and we have the material, the books.
Well, because of our technical glitch in the beginning, do you have a few more minutes?
Sure. And if you wanted to ask me about this latest book too, it's amazing.
I do. And of course, because I really respect the Hebrew language, this one caught my eye right away. And the other one was second. So tell us about this new endeavor here. Okay.
Well, as you can see on the bottom front, Dr. Danny Ben-Gigi, He is the number one foremost Hebrew translator from ancient Hebrew to modern Hebrew. He was born an Israeli citizen, fought in the Yom Kippur War. He teaches Hebrew to the Hebrew speakers. Like we have an English person teach us English in high school. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, he is like a neighbor of mine. And so we're always working very close together. And we were tired and frustrated with the inaccurate English translations of the Bible. As a matter of fact, there are over 900 different English translations. 900 different. They all have to be different because they're all copyrighted. Okay, so how do you get what's true? So what we've done, we've already created the entire New Testament in Hebrew. It's on a website. The whole New Testament is in Hebrew with Hebrew transliteration, so you can learn to read it and speak it. And then we've corrected the English, and so people can see the corrections, and there are a lot of incorrections. Well, we had so many people wanting it in a book form, but the problem is the font was so big because we wanted people to be able to see it that we've decided to finally break the New Testament down. We're going to put just the Gospels will be 800 pages. So the Gospels will be 800 pages, but it's going to have the Hebrew plus the Hebrew transliterated with English phonics, plus the corrected English translation. But what's blowing everybody away is something we did that's never been done in history before. We decided we also wanted to do the Old Testament, especially the Torah. So this is a physical book of Genesis. That's what we're doing. The physical book of Genesis only, and it's 320 pages, but it's alive. It's a printed book. It's alive because we have not only the Hebrew, with the Hebrew transliterated, we put QR codes in the book, and you hold your phone over the QR code and you can hear the Hebrew read to you. So you can hear it being read while you're looking at the book. And then we put other QR codes in that are like a 5-minute pop-up video. There's like 12 Torah portions in the book of Genesis. And so at the beginning of each one is a 5-minute video that pops up in your book. You're laying down reading the book, and all of a sudden you can see a video pop up where I'm talking about that Torah portion. And then there's also audio teaching all through the book where you can hear me explain why the translation was wrong and what this verse really meant.
Wow, that's a huge feat. It really is.
And we'll have it in about 6 weeks. The book of Genesis will be out, but it'll be the first Bible in history that is a physical book that also has audio and video built in.
Wow. I saw on your site that people can pre-order it, correct?
Yes. If they pre-order it now, we're doing something different on Amazon than we are on our home website. On Amazon right now, it's selling for $40, but we're selling it for $30 as a pre-order. Okay. But those that pay the $40, they will get the $15 download of the book of Genesis being read in Hebrew for free. If they wait, then they pay the $40, and then they got to pay $15 for the audio. But for the pre-sale, you can either get a $10 discount and not get the audio, or you can pay the regular price, but you get the $15 audio for free.
Where can people find that on your website?
ESM.us or on Amazon. You can go to Amazon. All my books are on Amazon as well. You can get them there or from our website.
Excellent. Well, I am thrilled that we were able to schedule this, and thank you so much. I'm sorry for the difficulties at first. Things happen, but that's never happened before. So anyhow, thank you. And I guess we should be praying about this new lunar eclipse coming on
We
Purim.
definitely want to be praying, because that is the very day that Amalek wanted to commit genocide and destroy all the Jewish people in the book of Esther. And so we definitely, and this lunar eclipse is coming over the United States. And I really believe we're going to be entering a time of war. I believe we're going to see terrorist attacks on the U.S. soil. And people are going to be in shock and awe when this happens. They're not going to be prepared for it like they are in Israel. And so my heart always goes out to people, because I would rather have the weather forecaster warn me a hurricane is coming, rather than have it hit and not be prepared. So I'm not a doom and gloom sayer, but I just warning people, this is what I see coming, and we need to be prepared as well.
Yeah, and it can be a reality because of all of the violent people that were allowed to come over.
Exactly.
From 2021, and we know that they were military-aged men for the most part,
Chinese,
from all over the world who hate us.
Yes, exactly.
And
well, I'm just so thankful for you, and I'm so thankful for you and your program. You're really being a light of God out to all of the world, and I just appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. I feel the same way about your ministry. Well, God bless you, Pastor Mark, and I hope that we get to do this again.
Oh, me
in
too.
The future.
Sounds good. Bye.